Hello guys, so today we are going to be talking about loops in Solidity, okay? Loops are very important in Solidity as sometimes if you have repetitive tasks which literally you want to carry out, it's good for you to use loops which can actually ease your work, right? So with that being said, let's get straight right into it so we can be able to see how we can demonstrate the use of loops in Solidity, okay? So in general, we have three types of loops, literally. We have the while loops, as you can see on the screen right here. We have the while loop, we have the do while loop, that's the second one, and we have the for loop, okay? And with the while loop, you must always follow this particular order, okay? Within the parentheses, you must make sure you always use the while keyword, and within the parentheses, make sure you have a condition which must be met before the statement or block of code to be executed if the condition is true, okay? So the statements to be executed literally is going to be within here, then the condition is going to be first. While with the do while loop, what happens is the conditions are literally being written at the end, okay, and the block of statements to be executed literally is within the do parentheses, okay. So it's important for you to know this. While for a for loop, we literally are going to always have an initialization, a test condition, then the iteration statement, okay, then the statement or block of code to be executed if the condition is true, right? So if you didn't understand what I just said, okay, literally we're going to demonstrate how you can be able to use this, okay? So we are going to begin with the while loop, right? So let's try to demonstrate this a little bit. So let's say for instance we have let's say we have a unit array. Let me just get out of this below here. Let's say starting with do while loops. Let's say we have a unit, an array, all right? Let's make it to be an array, and let's call it data1. Let's just say data or data1, and let's give uint j, okay. Let's have a uint parameter, and let's give it a value of 0. And within this we're going to have let's have a function, and we're going to call it loop. Let's call it loop1, okay. It's not going to take any parameter. We are going to make it public, and it's going to return an array, okay. Let's say uint returns uint memory. All right. So now let's say want to design a condition where with the while loop which we're starting with, we want to design a condition where when it says when j is, as long as j is less than 5, okay, the data is always going to be added into the data1 array, okay. Let's try to write this using the while loop. Remember, the while loop, the condition must always come first, so you must use the keyword while, all right. And you see it's just like saying while j is less than 5, for example, open your curly braces, and then this way you write the statement, okay. This is what you want to happen if j is less than 5. Then you can write that data1 dot push. Literally we are sending the value of, we want to increase, we don't want to send 0 into the array, okay. So we can increase j first. Let's say j plus plus, that's why increasing the value of j to 1. Then we push the value of j. Now that means our array is going to have a value of 1 at this particular point. So in the next iteration, j is going to have a value of 2, right? Since literally j is going to be added, and so on. It's going to keep happening until this condition is not met, okay. So let me write the return statement. Say return data1, right, as such. So if I should save this contract and I should deploy the contract, let's deploy this contract and see loop1, deploy this, and then let me run this. If I should show you what's happening on the terminal below here, okay, you can see that we have an array of values that was returned. That's from 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? So it's very important for you to know this. So it shows our loop is working properly, right? So this is literally a demonstration as to how you can be able to use a while loop. So let's go to the next type of loop, which is literally going to be the do while loop. Okay, with the do while loop, it's important for you to know how to use these do while loops, because based on the problem you're trying to solve, it's going to help you to know which type of loop literally is essential for you to use. All right, so similarly, let's just write underneath here, let's create another array, let's say units, and let's just call it data 2. All right, and let's give it let's have a variable, let's say I. Okay, and let's set I to 0 as well. Let's equally create a function. I can say function, let's say loop2. Let's set it to public, and returns, it's going to return an array, this unit. Let's save it in memory. So what are we going to be doing? What are we doing here? With the do while loop, we must always start with the do keyword, open a parenthesis, then write the statement of code which we want to run first before the condition, right? So what we want is, the statement of code we want to run first is, we want to increment we want to increment I, let's say I plus plus, increment the value of I. Then what we want to actually push the value of I into the new array. So I'm going to say data 2 dot push I. All right, then write the while condition. This is where the condition comes in. That's why it's called a do while loop. Right, now it's a while j is less than, while I less than 5. Right, then this is going to happen. So a do while loop must always run at least once, okay, rather than a while loop which it might not run at all. But to use a do while loop, make sure that your conditions must be set in a way in which it has to run at least once. All right, so let's write the return statement. Let's say return data 2. All right, so if I should save this, let's say if I should save this, let's say Control S. If I should save this, and if I should deploy, if I deploy the same contract, let's close the first one we had here. So if I should run loop 2, literally we should see the same thing, right? The same thing we have to see. Let me increase this for us to see what's happening on the terminal. We can see we have a value of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? So it shows that it's working properly, just same as the while loop, right? So similarly, based on what you're doing, you can either use the while loop or the do while loop or the for loop. It depends on what you're working on. Okay, there are some programs which you might be writing and the do while loop is preferable, meaning in the sense of you want some tasks to be done, okay, before literally the condition is met. While there are some other tasks which you literally want the conditions to be met first before the task is really executed. Okay, so it's necessary for you to know what you're doing, so you actually know when to use what type of loop, right? So let's move to the next type of loop, which is the for loop. And remember, with the for loop, as we said initially, the for loop literally has an initialization, it has a test condition and the iteration statement, right? Then it has a statement or block of code to be executed if the condition is true. Okay, so let's take a deep dive into this as to how literally we can be able to use this. Okay, let's see, we have units, let's see data, let's call it data 3. Okay, and let's make it, it should be an array. Right, and also let's we are going to create a function, right? It's a function, let's call it loop3. Okay, it's not going to take any parameters. Public returns, let's make it return an array. Let's save these digits in memory. All right, so what's taking place here? What are we going to be doing with the for loop? We must always make sure that, okay, we have some conditions. Okay, the first thing, we have the initialization. All right, then literally we have the condition, then the test if it's actually made. Okay, so first things first, we have the initialization. So we can say for. Okay, so you can just say int, uint, not int, uint. Let's say uint uint t. All right, let's initialize it to 0. All right, and c is less than, or given the condition right here. Okay, I think t should be less than 5, then c plus plus if it's met. Okay, so this is the initialization. So for every loop, this is going to start from here first. T is going to be set to 0, then this condition is going to be met. Is t less than 5? Yes, for the first time it's less than 5. Okay, so this is going to run. This is going to add the value of t. Okay, the statement which we are going to write here. So let's say data 3 dot push, data 3 dot push, let's say the value of t. Okay, it's very important for us to know this. So what's actually happening here is, so every time, so what's actually happening here is, every time this function is called, we are going to have a loop. Okay, t is going to be initialized to 0 for the first iteration. Then as long as t is going to be less than 5, we're going to increment the value of t. Then this value of t literally is now going to be pushed into the data array, right? So it's important for you to know this while working with for loops. For loops are always commonly used. Okay, so let's try to deploy this smart contract. Before deploying it, let me write the return statement. Return return data 3. All right, so let's deploy this, Control S, and let's deploy this and see. Let's deploy this. So we have loop 3 right now. So if I click on loop 3, let me open the terminal so we can see what's happening underneath here. If I should open this, we can see we have 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, now remember here we start from 0 because what happens here is t is incremented after it has been pushed to the array, not before. Okay, that's why. So if you want to see a value of 1 to 5, for example, we must make sure that we start from t is equal to 1. Okay, if we start from t is equal to 1, let's say less than 6, for example, here. And if I should save this contract and I should deploy the same contract again, if I deploy, and let's say I run loop 3 again, if you check bin underneath here what we have, we can see the values running twice. Okay, 0, 1, 2, the same contract or not? Okay, t being equal to 1, and as long as t is less than 6, push the value of t, maybe adding, let's see, loop 3 one more time. Okay, here we go. Right, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 because we are starting from the value of 1, right? So it's important for you to note how you can be able to use these different loops when working in Solidity. Okay, it's quite critical for you to know how to use this loop, because while working with smart contracts, based on what you're faced with, the problems which you're faced with, you can quickly decide on what type of loop you're going to use. Okay, be it whether it's a while loop, a do while loop, or a for loop. With the while loop, you must always ensure that the conditions are met first, then the code block or the statements to be run literally falls within the curly braces. Okay, now the next one which we spoke of is the do while loop. Okay, in the do while loop, first of all, the statement or the block of code which you want to run first have to be within the do while curly braces. Then the while loop comes, the while condition comes at the end. Okay, so the condition comes at the end, and remember, a do while loop must always run at least once, right? The next loop which we have spoken of literally is the for loop, which literally has to have an initialization, okay, a condition, right, and a tax literally which is going to either be incremented or decremented based on the conditions which you've set. Okay, so with this being said, literally, if you didn't understand what I just made mention in this video, you can always rewatch the video for you to understand it properly. Okay, so with that being said, I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Right, so stay connected.